Some souls are sent into our lives not to be rescued, but to teach us that we are never beyond saving. Snow falls in heavy silence across the Colorado mountains, covering the narrow forest road in a blanket of white that swallows every familiar landmark. The wind whistles through towering pine trees, carrying the sharp scent of frozen earth and evergreen needles as afternoon light slowly fades behind thick gray clouds. 14-year-old Ethan Brooks carefully guides the wheels of his chair along the packed snow outside a small mountain nature center where his physical therapist has encouraged him to spend time reconnecting with the outdoors. It has been nearly 2 years since the accident that changed everything. Before that day, Ethan had raced bicycles down country roads, climbed rocky hills without fear, and dreamed of joining the park rangers who protected these mountains. Now every movement requires patience. Every uneven patch of ground becomes another quiet reminder of what has been lost. Yet he still comes here whenever he can because the forest never looks at him with pity. The trees simply stand where they have always stood, asking nothing from anyone. A fresh gust of wind carries a faint sound through the storm. At first, Ethan believes it is only the branches rubbing together, but then he hears it again, softer this time, almost disappearing beneath the howling wind. It is a whimper. He stops immediately and listens. The sound comes from beyond a fallen pine tree where fresh snow has drifted several feet deep against a rocky embankment. Ethan pushes forward carefully, his gloved hands gripping the wheels as icy flakes gather across his jacket and knit cap. The path narrows until the chair can move no farther. He studies the snow-covered ground before carefully lowering himself onto his hands, refusing to let the deep snow stop him. Every movement is slow and exhausting as the cold bites through his gloves, but the faint cry comes once more, pulling him forward with quiet determination. Beneath tangled branches partially buried beneath the snow lies a young black and tan German shepherd, exhausted and trembling from the freezing weather. One front paw is trapped beneath a heavy broken limb that has fallen during the storm. The dog does not growl. He simply watches the boy with tired amber eyes that seem caught somewhere between fear and hope. Ethan speaks softly, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. He tells the frightened animal that everything will be all right even though he has no idea how he is going to keep that promise. Slowly he brushes away the snow with both hands before using every ounce of strength he has to shift the frozen branch just enough for the dog to pull free. For a brief second, neither of them moves. The German shepherd remains still, breathing heavily while studying the stranger who chose to help instead of walking away. Ethan smiles despite the cold burning his face. The dog carefully crawls closer, lowers his head, and gently presses his nose against Ethan's gloved hand. It is a simple gesture, almost weightless, yet something changes inside the silent forest at that very moment. The storm still rages overhead, but the loneliness that has followed Ethan since the accident suddenly feels a little smaller. Far above them, snow continues falling through the pine branches as if the mountains themselves are quietly witnessing the beginning of a bond that neither time nor hardship will ever be strong enough to break. The drive back to the small mountain town feels longer than usual as thick snow continues falling across the winding highway. Ethan keeps glancing toward the back seat where the young German shepherd lies quietly beneath a warm wool blanket borrowed from the nature center. Every few minutes the dog lifts his head just enough to make certain the boy is still there before settling down again. The simple gesture brings an unfamiliar warmth to Ethan's heart, one he has not felt in a very long time. At the local veterinary clinic, Dr. Sarah Mitchell carefully examines the exhausted animal while snowflakes melt against the large front windows. She smiles gently after completing the examination and explains that the dog is cold, dehydrated, and underweight, but otherwise remarkably fortunate. A few days of rest, nutritious food, and patient care should allow him to recover completely. Ethan releases a breath he did not realize he had been holding. The veterinarian asks whether anyone knows who owns the dog. No collar, no identification tag, no microchip. Only quiet amber eyes watching the room with cautious curiosity. Ethan's mother, Rebecca Brooks, notices the way the dog refuses to look away from her son. She exchanges a knowing glance with the veterinarian before quietly asking the question already growing inside Ethan's heart. Could they foster him until an owner is found? Dr. Mitchell nods with a warm smile. Sometimes families find each other in unexpected ways. The following morning, the storm finally passes, revealing brilliant blue skies stretching across snow-covered mountains. Sunlight sparkles across frozen fields while smoke rises peacefully from farmhouse chimneys. Inside the modest Brooks home, Ethan wakes earlier than he has in months after hearing soft footsteps outside his bedroom door. The German Shepherd waits patiently in the hallway, sitting perfectly still with ears raised as though standing guard through the entire night. Ethan laughs quietly, and the sound surprises even him. His laughter has become rare since the accident. The dog slowly approaches and gently rests his head upon Ethan's lap without asking for anything in return. Rebecca watches from the kitchen doorway, pretending to wipe the counter a little longer than necessary, so neither of them notices the tears gathering in her eyes. She remembers the cheerful boy who once filled every room with endless questions and impossible dreams before one terrible afternoon changed everything. Since then, silence has become a frequent visitor inside their home. Yet this morning feels different. Breakfast lasts longer because Ethan actually tells stories again. He wonders where the dog came from. He guesses how old he might be. He even smiles while suggesting names before finally settling on one that somehow feels right. Shadow. The German Shepherd lifts his ears the instant he hears it, as though quietly accepting the gift. Days pass, and Shadow quickly learns the rhythm of the household. Every morning, he waits beside Ethan's wheelchair before school lessons begin online. Every afternoon, he follows him onto the back porch where they watch deer wandering across distant meadows beneath towering pine trees. Every evening, he curls beside the fireplace while Ethan finishes homework or reads adventure novels about national parks he still dreams of visiting someday. Neither of them realizes it yet, but the loneliness that once filled every corner of the Brooks home has already begun slipping away, replaced by something much quieter and far more powerful. Hope has entered the house without making a sound, wearing 4 steady paws and carrying a faithful heart that has already decided it will never leave the boy who first chose kindness over comfort in the middle of a winter storm. Spring arrives quietly across the Colorado mountains, melting the last patches of snow into sparkling streams that wind through pine forests and open meadows. The Brooks family farmhouse feels brighter with every passing week as warm sunlight pours through the kitchen windows each morning. Shadow has regained all of his strength. His once thin frame is now powerful and healthy, his glossy black and tan coat shining beneath the gentle mountain sun. Yet the greatest change is not found in the dog. It is found in Ethan. Before Shadow entered his life, every day had seemed almost identical. Physical therapy sessions, online school, doctor appointments, and long afternoons watching seasons change beyond the living room window had slowly become the boundaries of his world. Since the accident, Ethan rarely believed tomorrow would be different from yesterday. Now each new morning begins with quiet anticipation because Shadow is already waiting beside his wheelchair before the first rays of sunlight touch the porch. Without speaking a single word, the German Shepherd somehow convinces the boy that every day still holds something worth discovering. Together, they develop countless small routines that gradually become the heartbeat of the household. After breakfast, Ethan rolls along the gravel path circling the property while Shadow walks beside him with calm confidence, occasionally stopping to watch a rabbit dart through the tall grass or a hawk soaring above the valley. In the afternoons, they sit beneath a towering ponderosa pine overlooking distant mountains where Ethan reads adventure books aloud while Shadow rests with his head across the boy's boots, listening as though every story belongs to both of them. Even physical therapy becomes different. Exercises that once felt exhausting now seem a little easier because Shadow remains nearby, patiently watching every attempt without judgment or impatience. Whenever Ethan struggles with frustration, the German Shepherd simply nudges his hand with a warm nose until another determined smile slowly appears. Rebecca notices changes that doctors never measured during appointments. Ethan laughs more often. He talks about the future again. He asks whether they might someday visit Rocky Mountain National Park together or camp beside an alpine lake once he grows stronger. Those dreams had disappeared after the accident, yet somehow they have quietly returned without anyone announcing their arrival. The neighbors begin noticing the remarkable bond as well. Children riding bicycles along the country road wave excitedly whenever Shadow trots proudly beside Ethan's wheelchair. The local mail carrier always carries an extra dog biscuit in his pocket, claiming that every good guardian deserves a proper reward. Even old Mr. Harrison, a retired rancher known for speaking very little, pauses one afternoon to tell Ethan that a truly loyal dog does not simply follow footsteps. He follows the heart. Ethan remembers those words long after the truck disappears down the dusty road. As weeks become months, Shadow never wanders far from the boy who once rescued him from the frozen mountainside. Whether Ethan studies, practices transferring between his wheelchair and therapy bench, or quietly watches sunsets paint the western sky with shades of gold and crimson, the German Shepherd is always nearby. Some evenings they simply sit together on the porch listening to crickets begin their nightly chorus, while cool mountain air carries the scent of wild sage across the valley. Nothing extraordinary seems to happen, yet those ordinary moments slowly heal wounds too deep for medicine alone. Neither Ethan nor Rebecca realizes that this peaceful season is quietly preparing them for a challenge unlike anything they have faced before, because sometimes the strongest bonds are tested only after they have become impossible to break. Summer settles gently over the Colorado mountains, filling the valleys with wildflowers and the sweet scent of sun-warmed pine. The mornings become Ethan's favorite part of the day. Long before the rest of the house awakens, he rolls onto the back porch with a mug of hot chocolate, while Shadow sits quietly beside him, watching the first golden light spread across distant ridges. It is during one of these peaceful mornings that Ethan notices something unusual. A pair of mule deer suddenly freeze at the edge of the tree line, their ears turning toward the upper slopes before they quietly disappear into the forest. Shadow notices them too. His posture changes instantly. His ears stand tall, and his eyes lock onto a narrow section of the mountain that overlooks the old hiking trail beyond the Brooks property. He does not bark. He simply stares with complete focus, as though listening to something too distant for human ears. Ethan follows his gaze but sees nothing except endless green pines moving gently in the breeze. Later that afternoon, they travel to the nearby rehabilitation center for Ethan's weekly therapy session. Shadow has become a familiar face there, greeting nurses, therapists, and patients with calm confidence. After therapy ends, Ethan asks his mother if they can take the scenic route home through Pine Ridge Road, a quiet drive that passes the national forest where the mountains rise sharply above crystal streams. Rebecca agrees, grateful to see her son enjoying simple adventures again. As the truck climbs the winding road, Shadow suddenly lifts his head from the back seat. His breathing slows. His ears point toward the forest. Then, without making a sound, he stands and presses gently against the rear window, watching one particular hillside disappear behind the trees. Ethan notices the same intense expression he had seen that morning. There is no fear in the dog's eyes, only certainty. They stop at a small scenic overlook where visitors often admire the sweeping mountain views. Families take photographs while hikers refill water bottles before continuing along nearby trails. Shadow steps out of the truck and immediately turns toward a narrow footpath leading into the woods. He walks several yards before stopping to look back at Ethan, waiting patiently as though inviting him to follow. Rebecca smiles and assumes he has simply caught the scent of wildlife, but the moment they call his name, Shadow reluctantly returns without hesitation. During the following week, the same strange behavior repeats itself. Whether they pass the overlook, drive along Pine Ridge Road, or even look toward the distant mountain from their porch, Shadow always focuses on the exact same section of forest. Sometimes he quietly whines beneath his breath. Other times he stands completely motionless for several minutes, never taking his eyes away from the trees. Ethan begins marking the location on a folded trail map he keeps beside his bed. Every line points to the same remote hillside where few people travel anymore because several old paths were closed after heavy winter storms. One evening, Ethan spreads the map across the kitchen table while Shadow rests beside him. He traces the faded trail with one finger and wonders aloud what could possibly be drawing the dog's attention day after day. Rebecca studies the map before softly reminding him that some questions do not always have immediate answers. Ethan nods, yet he cannot shake the feeling growing quietly inside his heart. Shadow is not acting out of curiosity. He is trying to tell them something. Outside, the last light of sunset slips behind the mountains, leaving the mysterious hillside wrapped in deep blue shadows, waiting with a silence that feels almost as though it has been patiently expecting someone to finally listen. The first Saturday of August arrives with clear skies, cool mountain air, and the kind of sunshine that makes every pine needle shimmer beneath a brilliant blue horizon. Rebecca suggests spending the morning at the outdoor rehabilitation program held near Pine Ridge, where therapists encourage patients to practice confidence beyond the walls of the clinic. Ethan agrees without hesitation. He has been looking forward to returning to the mountains ever since he marked the mysterious hillside on his map. Shadow seems unusually alert from the moment they leave the farmhouse. His ears remain forward during the entire drive, and every curve along Pine Ridge Road draws his attention toward the same stretch of forest that has quietly occupied his thoughts for weeks. When they arrive, several families are already gathered beside a wide meadow where adaptive wheelchairs, hiking equipment, and picnic tables sit beneath tall ponderosa pines. Laughter drifts through the crisp morning air while birds circle high above the valley. Ethan spends nearly an hour practicing on a specially designed off-road wheelchair with large rugged tires that allow him to travel across dirt paths and gentle slopes. Every successful turn fills him with a little more confidence. His therapist smiles proudly as Ethan navigates uneven ground that would have seemed impossible only months earlier. Shadow never leaves his side. He walks close enough that Ethan can reach down to touch the thick fur along his neck whenever the trail becomes challenging. As the group prepares for a short nature excursion, the trail curves toward a quiet overlook facing the familiar mountainside. The instant Shadow sees it, he stops walking. His entire body becomes perfectly still. Then, for the first time, he quietly steps away from Ethan and begins moving down a narrow service path that branches away from the main trail. He looks back only once, waiting. Ethan feels the same strange certainty settle inside him again. He politely asks his therapist whether they can explore just a little farther before lunch. The therapist checks the weather, sees the calm skies, and agrees as long as they remain within sight of the marked trail. Rebecca follows close behind while Shadow continues leading them at an unhurried pace through scattered pine trees where sunlight dances across the forest floor. The air grows noticeably cooler beneath the thick canopy. Small streams trickle between smooth granite rocks, and the scent of damp moss rises with every gentle breeze. After nearly half a mile, Shadow suddenly pauses beside an old wooden footbridge that crosses a shallow ravine. Ethan notices several warning signs explaining that the original hiking route beyond this point has been closed since severe winter storms weakened sections of the trail. He studies the faded map mounted beside the bridge and realizes this is exactly the area he circled at home. Before anyone can decide whether to turn back, a distant rumble echoes through the valley. It is not thunder. It is the sound of shifting earth somewhere higher along the mountainside. Birds burst from the treetops all at once, filling the sky with frantic wings before disappearing into the distance. Shadow immediately lifts his head toward the slope ahead. His calm expression vanishes, replaced by intense focus. He takes several quick steps forward, then stops and looks directly into Ethan's eyes as though asking him to trust one more impossible feeling. None of them can yet see what has changed beyond the trees, but the peaceful forest no longer feels quite as quiet as it did only moments before. Rebecca raises one hand, signaling everyone to stop where they are. The distant rumble fades as quickly as it began, leaving only the gentle murmur of the creek beneath the old wooden bridge. For a few long seconds, the forest becomes completely still. Even the breeze seems to hold its breath. Ethan studies the hillside beyond the trees, searching for movement, but the dense pines reveal nothing except shifting patches of sunlight. His therapist quietly suggests returning to the main trail. The sound could have been nothing more than loose rocks settling after months of changing weather. Rebecca nods in agreement and reaches for the handles of Ethan's off-road wheelchair. Before she can turn it around, Shadow suddenly steps backward, his eyes never leaving the mountainside. He lets out one short, urgent bark. It is the first time Ethan has heard that sound from him since the winter storm that brought them together. There is no panic in it, only purpose. Then, without hesitation, Shadow turns and sprints down the narrow trail, disappearing between towering pines. Ethan calls his name instinctively, but the German Shepherd never looks back. His powerful strides carry him deeper into the forest until only the sound of rustling branches remains. Rebecca immediately reaches for her phone, relieved to see a weak signal. She contacts the park ranger station and calmly explains that their dog has unexpectedly run toward a closed section of trail after hearing an unusual sound from the mountain. The ranger thanks her and promises to send someone to check the area. Ethan cannot take his eyes off the path where Shadow disappeared. Every instinct tells him this is different from chasing wildlife or exploring unfamiliar ground. The dog had waited for weeks, watching the same hillside every single day, and now he has finally gone toward it. Nearly 15 minutes pass. The group waits beside the bridge while warm sunlight slowly shifts across the forest floor. Then another sound reaches them. Not the rumble from before, but the distant echo of barking carried through the trees. One bark, then another, each separated by several seconds, almost as though Shadow is carefully guiding someone instead of calling randomly into the wilderness. The park ranger arrives in a utility vehicle with another volunteer from the local search and rescue team. After listening carefully to Ethan describe Shadow's unusual behavior over the past several weeks, the ranger studies the map mounted beside the bridge. He frowns thoughtfully. The closed trail beyond the ridge has not been inspected in several months because heavy snowfall damaged portions of the route during the winter. If something has changed there, very few people would know. The search team gathers basic equipment before following the direction of the barking. Ethan watches them disappear among the pines, his hands resting tightly against the wheels of his chair. Time suddenly feels strangely heavy. Every minute stretches longer than the last. Rebecca gently places a comforting hand on his shoulder, reminding him that Shadow is intelligent and well-trained by instinct if not by formal command. Ethan nods, but worry quietly settles inside his heart. He whispers that Shadow once trusted him enough to believe help would come through the snow. Now it is his turn to trust Shadow. Far beyond the trees, another distant bark echoes across the mountain, followed by voices too faint to understand. The ranger standing beside Ethan slowly lifts his binoculars toward the ridge, and a look of quiet surprise begins to spread across his face. The ranger lowers his binoculars slowly, his expression changing from curiosity to quiet relief. He speaks into his radio with calm urgency, asking the search team to continue another 300 yards along the closed trail before turning east toward a small rocky clearing hidden beneath the trees. Ethan cannot hear the response through the crackling speaker, but he notices the ranger smiling for the first time since arriving. Several minutes later, another voice comes over the radio. It is steady, grateful, and filled with unmistakable excitement. Shadow has been found. More importantly, he is not alone. The German Shepherd is sitting beside an elderly hiker who had become stranded after taking a wrong turn the previous afternoon. The man had remained sheltered beneath a natural rock overhang after discovering that one section of the old trail had become blocked by fallen trees. His cell phone battery had died overnight, and because the route had been officially closed after the winter storms, very few people had passed anywhere near his location. The search team reports that the hiker is tired and dehydrated but alert, smiling, and incredibly thankful. They explain that when they reached the clearing, Shadow refused to leave the man's side until the rescuers arrived. Ethan closes his eyes for just a moment, allowing a deep breath to escape. Rebecca gently squeezes his shoulder while tears quietly gather in her eyes. Nearly half an hour later, the first members of the rescue team emerge from the forest. Walking beside them with calm confidence is Shadow. His thick coat is sprinkled with pine needles, and his paws carry traces of mountain dust. Yet his steady amber eyes immediately search the crowd until they find Ethan. Without hesitation, he trots across the clearing and rests his head against the boy's knee exactly as he had done on the first morning inside the Brooks home. Ethan wraps both arms around the German Shepherd's neck, smiling so brightly that everyone nearby falls silent for a moment. Soon afterward, the rescued hiker reaches the trailhead with assistance from the search team. His name is Walter Jensen, a retired school principal from Fort Collins who had been photographing wildflowers before accidentally wandering onto the abandoned route. He kneels carefully beside Shadow, his voice trembling with gratitude as he explains that throughout the long night the faithful dog never stopped checking on him. Whenever discouragement began to settle into his heart, Shadow simply stayed close, quietly reminding him that he was not facing the mountains alone. Ranger Michael Dawson listens carefully as Ethan describes the strange behavior Shadow had shown for weeks before this day. The repeated visits to the overlook, the unwavering stare toward the same hillside, the quiet determination that no one else understood. The ranger nods thoughtfully before admitting that experienced search dogs sometimes notice details long before people recognize that anything is unusual. Sometimes instinct notices what reason overlooks. News of the remarkable rescue spreads quickly through the small mountain community. By evening, neighbors begin stopping by the Brooks farmhouse carrying homemade pies, fresh vegetables from their gardens, and handwritten notes thanking the extraordinary German shepherd whose quiet persistence helped save a stranger. Ethan watches Shadow resting peacefully on the porch beneath the golden light of sunset, realizing that the dog he once believed he had rescued had just given another family the priceless gift of bringing someone they loved safely home. The days that follow carry a different kind of quiet through the Brooks farmhouse. It is no longer the silence of loneliness, but the peaceful stillness that comes after hope has found a place to stay. Reporters from nearby towns briefly tell the remarkable story of the faithful German shepherd whose determination helped guide rescuers to a stranded hiker, yet the attention fades almost as quickly as it arrives. Life settles back into its familiar rhythm. Ethan prefers it that way. Every morning still begins with Shadow waiting patiently beside his wheelchair before the first light reaches the kitchen windows. Every evening still ends with both of them watching the sun disappear behind the Colorado peaks as cool mountain air carries the scent of pine across the valley. One Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca receives an unexpected phone call from Dr. Emily Foster, the rehabilitation specialist who has followed Ethan's recovery since his accident. She explains that several people involved in the recent rescue have quietly reached out after hearing Ethan's story. Among them is Walter Jensen, the retired school principal whose life Shadow helped save. Deeply moved by the bond between the boy and his dog, Walter has chosen to make a generous contribution to a regional foundation that supports advanced mobility therapy for children recovering from spinal injuries. The foundation has decided to offer Ethan a place in an intensive rehabilitation program that rarely has openings because of overwhelming demand. Rebecca listens in complete silence before gently lowering herself into a kitchen chair. For a long moment, she cannot find the words to answer. The program combines specialized physical therapy, advanced robotic gait training, and personalized rehabilitation designed to strengthen movement over many months. Dr. Foster carefully reminds her that no physician can promise miracles. Progress cannot be guaranteed. Recovery follows its own path for every patient. Yet she also believes Ethan has the determination, the family support, and now the opportunity to achieve more than anyone once imagined. When Ethan returns home from feeding the chickens behind the barn, with Shadow faithfully following beside him, Rebecca shares the news. He simply stares at her, uncertain whether he has heard correctly. For so long, every medical conversation has centered on limitations, adjustments, and acceptance. This is the first time someone has spoken about possibilities. Shadow quietly walks across the room and rests his head against Ethan's hand, just as he always does whenever the boy faces something difficult. Ethan smiles through eyes filled with grateful disbelief. He whispers that perhaps the greatest changes begin with the smallest moments, like choosing to help a frightened dog during a snowstorm without expecting anything in return. 2 weeks later, they arrive at the rehabilitation center nestled against the foothills west of Denver. Large windows overlook evergreen forests, while bright therapy rooms echo with encouragement instead of frustration. Children practice determined steps beside caring therapists, each celebrating victories that outsiders might never notice. Ethan feels nervous as he studies the sophisticated equipment waiting inside the training gym. Dr. Foster welcomes him warmly before explaining that recovery is measured one movement at a time, never all at once. As Ethan begins his first evaluation, Shadow settles quietly nearby with calm eyes fixed on the boy he has never stopped believing in. Outside, sunlight filters through tall pine trees, filling the room with a gentle golden glow, and for the first time since the accident, the future no longer feels like a distant mountain hidden behind clouds. It feels like a trail waiting patiently for the courage to take the very first step. Autumn arrives one quiet morning, painting the Colorado foothills with brilliant shades of amber, crimson, and gold. The rehabilitation center becomes Ethan's second home as the weeks slowly turn into months. Every weekday begins before sunrise. Rebecca prepares breakfast while the aroma of fresh coffee fills the farmhouse, and Shadow waits faithfully beside the front door long before anyone asks him to. The drive west toward the center has become so familiar that Ethan can recognize every curve in the highway, every old red barn, and every stretch of open pasture where horses graze beneath the endless sky. Progress does not come quickly. Some mornings his muscles respond with surprising strength. Other days, even the smallest exercise feels as though he is climbing a mountain that refuses to end. Dr. Emily Foster reminds him again and again that healing is rarely a straight road. It bends, pauses, and sometimes even seems to move backward before quietly finding its way forward once more. Ethan learns not to measure success by dramatic changes, but by moments that would have seemed invisible only a few months earlier. A stronger grip on the therapy bars, better balance while sitting upright, a few extra seconds maintaining his posture without assistance. Each tiny victory becomes another stone laid across a river that once seemed impossible to cross. Shadow never misses a session. The staff members greet him every morning as though he is part of the medical team. Children waiting for appointments smile the instant they see him padding calmly through the hallway. Nurses joke that he somehow knows exactly who needs comfort before anyone says a word. During Ethan's gait training sessions, Shadow quietly lies near the therapy platform, watching every movement with complete attention. Whenever Ethan's determination begins to fade, he only has to look into those familiar amber eyes to remember how far they have already come together. One rainy afternoon, Ethan struggles through an especially difficult session using robotic walking supports designed to encourage natural movement. His legs tremble with exhaustion, and frustration slowly settles across his face. He lowers his head, convinced that nothing is changing quickly enough. Dr. Foster gently asks for a short break before stepping away to adjust the equipment. Shadow walks across the therapy room without being called. He stops directly in front of Ethan and gently places one paw against the boy's shoe, just as he had rested his nose against Ethan's hand on that snowy afternoon months before. Ethan smiles despite himself. He reaches down to stroke the thick fur behind Shadow's ears, and the disappointment quietly begins to loosen its grip. Sometimes encouragement does not sound like cheering. Sometimes it arrives in silence beside someone who refuses to let you give up. As Thanksgiving approaches, the rehabilitation team performs another full evaluation. They compare measurements, balance tests, muscle responses, and endurance with the records from Ethan's first day. Dr. Foster studies the results carefully before looking toward Rebecca with a smile she can no longer hide. The improvements are small enough that most people would overlook them, yet together they tell a remarkable story. Ethan is becoming stronger, not because of one extraordinary breakthrough, but because he has chosen hope every single day. Walking out of the center that evening beneath crisp autumn skies, Ethan notices Shadow matching his pace beside the wheelchair as fallen leaves drift gently across the parking lot. He realizes that every mile of this journey has been shared by the friend who never once questioned whether tomorrow might bring something better than today. Winter returns to the Colorado mountains with quiet determination, covering the distant peaks in fresh snow that glows beneath pale morning sunlight. Nearly a year has passed since Ethan first found Shadow beneath the fallen pine tree, and the seasons seem to have carried both of them farther than either could have imagined. Inside the rehabilitation center, familiar faces greet them with warm smiles as another day of therapy begins. Dr. Emily Foster reviews Ethan's latest progress before leading him toward the parallel bars that have become symbols of patience rather than struggle. Shadow quietly takes his usual place beside the therapy area, lying calmly with his eyes fixed on every movement Ethan makes. The room hums softly with determination as other patients practice their own journeys toward healing. No one competes against anyone else. Every person is simply trying to become a little stronger than yesterday. Ethan places both hands on the polished rails and takes a slow breath. His muscles have grown stronger over the past months, but every attempt still demands complete concentration. Dr. Foster reminds him not to think about the finish line. Only the next movement matters. Ethan nods. He shifts his weight carefully, feeling his legs respond with a steadiness that once seemed impossible. The room becomes strangely quiet. Rebecca stands near the doorway with both hands clasped together, hardly daring to breathe. Shadow slowly rises from the floor without making a sound. Ethan presses downward against the rails, his shoulders trembling with effort as he gradually lifts himself higher. For one unforgettable moment, he is standing. Not perfectly, not without support, but standing. The afternoon sunlight streams through the tall windows, wrapping the room in a warm golden glow as though the mountains themselves have paused to witness the moment. No one speaks. There is only the quiet rhythm of Ethan's breathing and the soft click of the therapy equipment. Then something even more remarkable happens. Shadow walks forward until he is only a few feet away. He does not jump or bark. He simply sits, watching Ethan with calm, unwavering confidence, exactly as he had watched him through every difficult day since they first met. Ethan looks into those familiar amber eyes and finds the courage to remain upright for another second. Then another. Dr. Foster glances at the timer in her hand before smiling through tears she no longer tries to hide. Rebecca covers her mouth, overwhelmed by a joy too deep for words. When Ethan slowly lowers himself back into his chair, the room fills with gentle applause from therapists, patients, and families who understand that miracles are often measured in seconds rather than miles. Shadow quietly walks to Ethan's side and rests his head against the boy's shoulder. Ethan wraps one arm around his faithful companion, remembering the frightened dog buried beneath snow on a lonely mountainside. He whispers a simple thank you, although he is no longer certain whether he is thanking the dog, the people who believed in him, or the quiet grace that had carried them both through every impossible season. As they leave the rehabilitation center that evening, snow begins falling outside in slow, peaceful flakes. Ethan watches them drift across the darkening sky and realizes that hope had never arrived all at once. It had come one faithful day after another, carried beside him on 4 steady paws until the impossible slowly became the beginning of something beautifully real. By early spring, the snow has begun retreating from the lower valleys, leaving behind rushing creeks and fresh patches of green stretching across the Colorado foothills. The Brooks farmhouse feels lighter than it has in years. Every new day carries quiet evidence that life is moving forward. Ethan no longer measures his future by what he cannot do. Instead, he celebrates every small milestone that yesterday seemed impossible. Some mornings he practices standing beside the kitchen counter for a few extra moments before sitting down again. Other days he focuses on strengthening exercises that leave his muscles tired but his spirit stronger than before. Through every victory and every setback, Shadow remains exactly where he has always been, watching with the same calm confidence that never asks for perfection, only perseverance. One Saturday afternoon, Dr. Emily Foster encourages Ethan to practice walking outdoors with his support braces and a lightweight walker instead of remaining inside the therapy gym. The rehabilitation team meets at a peaceful community park overlooking a small lake where cottonwood trees sway gently in the spring breeze. Children laugh on distant playgrounds while ducks glide across the still water beneath clear blue skies. It is the perfect place to replace fear with confidence. Rebecca walks a respectful distance behind, allowing Ethan the freedom to discover his own rhythm. Shadow stays close beside him, matching every careful movement without pulling ahead or falling behind. The first several yards pass slowly. Ethan concentrates on each deliberate step, listening to Dr. Foster's steady reminders to trust both his training and himself. His legs tremble with effort, but they continue moving forward. Suddenly, a playful golden retriever chasing a bright red tennis ball bounds across the walking path several yards ahead. The cheerful dog means no harm and quickly stops when his owner calls, yet the unexpected movement briefly startles Shadow. For the first time since joining the Brooks family, he hesitates, uncertain whether he should stay beside Ethan or investigate the unfamiliar dog. Ethan notices the uncertainty immediately. Without thinking, he gently speaks the same quiet words he whispered during that winter storm so many months ago. "Everything is going to be all right." Shadow immediately turns back toward him. His ears relax, and he calmly returns to Ethan's side as though remembering exactly where he belongs. Dr. Foster smiles softly, recognizing something far more meaningful than another successful therapy exercise. The roles have quietly changed. Once, Shadow had carried Ethan through fear and loneliness. Now Ethan possesses the confidence to reassure the faithful companion who had spent an entire year protecting him. They continue walking together until they reach a wooden bench overlooking the lake. Ethan slowly lowers himself onto the seat while Shadow rests beside his feet, gazing peacefully across the shimmering water. Rebecca watches from a short distance, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She realizes that healing has touched far more than her son's body. It has transformed the way he sees himself. Before meeting Shadow, Ethan believed he needed someone to rescue him from the life he had lost. Now he understands something much deeper. Strength is not measured by how often we are protected. It is measured by the moment we become capable of protecting hope in someone else. As the afternoon sun settles gently across the lake, Ethan reaches down and scratches the familiar spot behind Shadow's ears. The German Shepherd closes his eyes for just a moment, completely at peace, trusting the boy who had once saved his life and who now stood ready to return that same quiet gift whenever it was needed. Summer returns once again to the Colorado mountains, carrying the familiar fragrance of pine forests, wildflowers, and warm earth after gentle afternoon rain. Nearly 18 months have passed since Shadow first entered the Brooks family's life, and the little mountain town has quietly watched both the boy and the German Shepherd become symbols of something difficult to explain but impossible to forget. On a bright Saturday morning, colorful banners flutter across the town square as neighbors gather for the annual Community Appreciation Day. Local musicians tune their instruments beneath white tents while children chase bubbles drifting through the sunlight. Homemade pies cool on folding tables, and the laughter of families echoes between old brick buildings that have stood for generations. Ethan arrives beside Rebecca with Shadow calmly walking at his side. Although he still uses his wheelchair for longer distances, he now carries his lightweight walking braces with growing confidence, needing them only for shorter stretches as part of his continued rehabilitation. Ranger Michael Dawson welcomes them with a warm handshake before leading them toward a small wooden stage decorated with fresh mountain flowers. Walter Jensen is already waiting there, standing comfortably beneath the shade of a large cottonwood tree. His smile widens the moment he sees Shadow. When the gathering becomes quiet, the mayor speaks only briefly. He explains that every community is shaped not only by grand accomplishments, but by quiet acts of kindness that inspire others to become kinder themselves. He thanks the search and rescue volunteers, the rehabilitation team, the Brooks family, and especially the faithful German Shepherd whose steady instincts helped bring a lost neighbor safely home. Then he invites Walter to share a few words. The elderly man removes a folded piece of paper from his jacket, but quickly smiles and places it back into his pocket. He says he prepared a speech, yet now realizes the story never belonged to him alone. Instead, he turns toward Ethan. He tells everyone that when hope seems impossible to find, it often arrives wearing an ordinary face. Sometimes it is a frightened boy choosing compassion on a snowy afternoon. Sometimes it is a loyal dog refusing to leave someone behind. Sometimes it is an entire community deciding that one family deserves another chance. The applause that follows is gentle rather than thunderous, carrying more gratitude than celebration. Dr. Emily Foster stands among the crowd with several therapists from the rehabilitation center, smiling proudly as Ethan slowly rises with the support of his braces and walker to accept a simple framed certificate recognizing courage, perseverance, and compassion. Before anyone can ask for a photograph, Shadow quietly walks beside him and sits with perfect calm, looking not toward the cameras but toward Ethan himself. Rebecca wipes away grateful tears while neighbors lower their phones for a moment, realizing that some memories deserve to be experienced before they are captured. As the ceremony comes to an end, children gather around Shadow, laughing as he patiently accepts every gentle pat and friendly smile. Ethan watches them with peaceful contentment. He understands now that the greatest stories rarely change only two lives. Like ripples spreading across a quiet mountain lake, one simple act of mercy continues reaching hearts that may never fully know where it began. Above the town square, The summer breeze stirs the flags beneath an endless blue sky, and somewhere beyond the distant ridges, the same silent mountains stand watching over the place where one small decision had quietly transformed an entire community. 3 years pass as quietly as the changing seasons across the Colorado mountains. The forests continue welcoming each sunrise with the scent of pine and fresh earth, while clear streams carve familiar paths through the valleys below. The Brooks farmhouse remains filled with the simple rhythms that once seemed impossible to imagine. Ethan is no longer the frightened boy who believed his world had ended after one tragic afternoon. Countless hours of determination, faithful therapy, and patient encouragement have reshaped his future one ordinary day at a time. He still keeps his wheelchair nearby for long distances whenever his body needs rest, but more often now he walks with the support of a single hiking pole along the gravel paths surrounding the family property. Every step reminds him that miracles rarely arrive in an instant. They are built quietly through perseverance, kindness, and the courage to begin again after disappointment. Shadow has grown older too. A few silver hairs now brighten the fur around his muzzle, and his once effortless stride has become slower and more deliberate. Yet his amber eyes remain unchanged. They still carry the same calm wisdom that first met Ethan beneath the snow-covered branches years ago. On a peaceful September evening, they return together to the overlook above Pine Ridge, where so much of their journey quietly unfolded. The mountains stretch endlessly beneath a sky painted with soft shades of gold, lavender, and fading blue. Cool autumn air carries the familiar fragrance of evergreen trees, while distant elk calls echo gently through the valley. Ethan walks the final few yards without assistance before lowering himself onto the old wooden bench overlooking the forest. Shadow settles beside him with a contented sigh, resting his head gently against Ethan's knee exactly as he has done through every season of their friendship. Neither of them needs words. The silence between them has always spoken more honestly than conversation ever could. Ethan reaches into his backpack and removes the folded trail map that once held a small pencil circle around the mysterious hillside. Time has softened its edges, but he still remembers every moment connected to it. He smiles before quietly placing the old map inside a wooden information box recently installed by the Park Service beside the overlook. A small brass plaque above it reads, "Leave hope for the next traveler." Ethan believes someone else may someday open that box, unfold the worn map, and remember that every path, no matter how uncertain, can still lead home. As the last sunlight slips behind the mountains, a gentle breeze stirs the pine branches overhead. Shadow slowly rises to his feet. Ethan stands beside him. Together, they begin walking down the familiar trail, one steady step after another, their long shadows stretching across the golden earth beneath the fading light. There is no cheering crowd waiting below, no cameras recording the moment, and no grand speech to explain what has happened. None of it is necessary. The greatest gift was never the rescue on the mountain, the recognition from the town, or even the precious progress Ethan made through years of rehabilitation. The greatest gift was far quieter than any of those things. A lonely boy gave compassion to a forgotten dog without asking for anything in return. The dog answered with unwavering loyalty that slowly led an entire family back to hope. And somewhere beyond the whispering pines, beneath the endless Colorado sky, Grace continued walking beside them, both on 4 faithful paws and 2 determined feet, proving that sometimes the lives we believe we save become the very lives that gently save our own.